Today's business landscape is ever-changing, bringing some mounting pressures for companies to keep up with their competitors and stay agile in their industries. Companies still using traditional spreadsheets or clunky legacy systems face disjointed planning cycles, manual processes, and data connectivity limitations. This is where MODLR comes in. MODLR is a planning, analytics, and reporting platform that empowers companies to streamline their financial and operational planning processes with collaborative planning. MODLR connects data, plans, and people across every corner of your business for accurate, faster decision-making. From a single department such as finance to enterprise-wide planning across all teams and processes, MODLR's collaborative planning platform solves operational inefficiencies, reduces companies' risks and costs, and increases business value. The MODLR Cloud provides companies with the speed and agility to rapidly respond to market changes and stay on top of their industries. Such as CBH, a mining company based in New South Wales, Australia, who use the MODLR Cloud to build their annual budgets and execute their month-end close. When using traditional spreadsheets for their financial planning, CBH resources experience stressful month-ends and prolonged budgeting cycles due to manual process handling from a multitude of financial and operational data sources, version control errors causing confusion and wasted time tracking the latest spreadsheet version, and disconnected planning across business silos, causing bottlenecks in processes and chasing users for their data inputs. Now, using MODLR for their budgeting and month-end means CBH can leverage the power of collaborative, cloud-based planning and streamline their team's workflow through eliminating version control errors and using a single version of truth, improving company-wide collaboration, breaking down the business silos and enabling users to concurrently work together on plans, allowing the finance team time to focus on high-value work instead, and automating manual processes from their budgeting and month-end, such as data imports, and automating P&L, balance sheet, and reporting, means CBH can move beyond laborious, time-consuming tasks and have full confidence in their numbers using a single source of truth. Learn more about the MODLR Cloud today.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening for our invitees connected from different time zones across the globe. I'm glad to welcome you all for our first webinar, Plan Everything, Ready for Anything. And on behalf of MODLR and Infointellica, we are happy to announce the partnership between the two companies aligned with our mission to provide right tools to improve the enterprise productivity. Kavinda Mahawadage, co-founder and director of Infointellica, over to you for opening remarks. Kavinda?
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks, Mr. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, would like to welcome all of you all for the Plan Everything, Ready for Anything webinar today, and thank you for taking time off from your busy schedule and joining the webinar. So like Dinesh said, we partnered with MODLR, which is a corporate performance management software, and would like to share how MODLR can help your organization. And let's sort of explore what it is. Dinesh, over to you.
Sure. Thank you, Kavinda. Today we have Ben Hill, the Chief Executive Officer of MODLR, to showcase the mind-blowing capabilities of platform to make your life easier. Ben, it's over to you.
All right, I'll just get set up. Okay. Well, first of all, thank you all for joining us today. It's a great opportunity to take you through the MODLR platform. And we've got some really exciting live demonstrations to share with you. And before we do that, I'd love to just take you through some high-level planning concepts. First of all, I want to look at how people typically plan using an Excel environment, some of the throwbacks to doing that. The first one here being that quite a lot of lower value activities end up taking a bigger portion of our time. And then kind of each one of these other boxes actually is just alluding to that fact. So often our plans end up being out of date before they're complete. Collaborations are limited due to the technology we use. If we're looking at Excel spreadsheets, we usually have that one user per spreadsheet limit for writebacks, actually typing numbers in. Iterations on the plans take more and more time as the round continues. And to be honest, that box is almost linked to that middle box at the top, because if you have a budget that's taking multiple months to complete, you're then getting actual data for additional months that could actually have an impact on that active plan that you're working on moving forward. Each time you have those iterations of the plan, budget version 1, budget version 2, it takes additional time to prepare packs that consolidate that information and put it in a presentable format for then talking through. And then we're limited in the ability to then stress test because of that time constraint. Because again, all of these activities are taking up our valuable time and not giving us that time to stress test the plans or play with sensitivities. And sensitivities analysis is something we'll talk about a little bit later on. So breaking it down to its core bones here, the first limitation is that you have that multi-user limitation. Only one person can be typing numbers into a spreadsheet at a time using traditional spreadsheets. Limitation number 2 is that they don't automate the flow of new information into those models. So if you think of a big bottom-up budgeting process where you've got actuals for last year, or you're thinking of a rolling forecast, actually is more appropriate. You have actuals flowing in for a portion of the year, and then your drivers are extrapolated out, and then your financials extrapolated out. But if you're taking a long time to do that, then you've got a new month of actuals you need to bring into those planning templates and then extrapolate out. And that's something you'd want to do in an automated fashion. Yeah, it's possible, but it becomes quite tricky as the models develop over time. We have issues with consolidating information in Excel through linked spreadsheets. And there's a real tangible security threat with Excel spreadsheets, having the wrong person pick up a payroll file on a map network drive, or not even mentioning, well, speaking about that, the pretty insecure password system on Excel workbooks. So all of these pitfalls with spreadsheets end up directing us to having lower, slower reaction times when it comes to reacting to market forces and creating quick little plans to actually understand what we're going to do next as a business. And so that means we've got longer timeframes to recover from extraneous market circumstances such as global pandemics. Whereas if we use a planning technology that's built for this kind of activity, it means we can have faster planning cycles where we're bringing in that actual information in near real time to update those plans and roll them forward. It means that we're spending more of our time stress testing those plans and playing with sensitivities and kind of what if scenarios. And it means that we can react to market forces a lot quicker. All right, let's talk about planning concepts. The first one here is granularity, and it's quite an interesting one because you have a varied approach when it comes to granularity. And granularity is the level to which you plan. You could have a very high level plan that's a few key numbers on the back of a napkin agreed between C-level executives at a cafe down the road. Or you can have a detailed plan that goes into every nook and cranny of the detail of the business, down to the nominal account code by company, by business unit, product, project, sales channel, and so on. And to be honest, picking the right level of granularity in a planning model, one thing I'd say is that there's no one level of granularity. I think different areas of the business should be planned to different levels of granularity. If you're looking at manufacturing wages planning, that should be kind of more at that production level in terms of wages. You want to know what your hours are, and it's kind of hours gets rounded up to a number of heads and so on. Whereas if you're doing kind of OPEX back office planning for payroll, you could probably actually plan down to the person and actually have a line item per person there. Really, you're looking to plan to a level where the cost of time and effort involved is justified by the value of having that plan at that granular detail. Next concept here is plan horizon, because not all plans are annual budgets and rolling forecasts. If we're looking at something like labor shift scheduling, it's a shorter time frame. Marketing promotions again, or kind of, yeah. If we look at the long term of things, we have kind of city councils, government that do these long term kind of 5 to 10 year plans as well. And so planning for the right horizon makes sense. It's something to actually question when designing a planning model. And the thing to keep in mind here is that our accuracy of our plans decreases dramatically over longer and longer periods. And then scenarios as a concept is quite an interesting one. A lot of the time when we're planning in traditional spreadsheets, we don't think of scenarios. A scenario is typically kind of that version of that Excel file. And if we want to create a different scenario to maybe modify Forex exchange rates and see what the impact will be on the numbers, we're creating a copy of that file in Excel world. That becomes quite cumbersome, especially if we have a good kind of couple of hundred Excel spreadsheets linked to that to consolidate that information up. It just becomes a bit of a real nightmare. And so having a planning tool that lets you run any number of scenarios where you can model different constraints that may be around your existing plans, and could maybe account for different market initiatives or market impacts to your business, gives you a lot more flexibility. So it gives you the ability to ask the questions, what happens to our budget if the currency exchange rate changes materially between, for our biggest customer sales orders, or what if we lose our biggest customer, or what if there's a worldwide pandemic? When we talk about planning methodologies, we talk about things like planning from the bottom up or from the top down. When we plan from the bottom up, it's typically a wider process with a lot more people involved. We talk about concepts like zero-based or run rate. Now, zero-based is very much a good standard budgeting methodology. It's where we're starting from the ground up and plugging numbers in for base level of cost. We're not thinking about not thinking too much about prior year's spend. We're building it up from basically a zero-sum game here to work out from that ground level up what we need in our budgets. Run rate, on the other hand, is more for rolling forecasts and rolling numbers. It's where we start with the history of the business and how things have been progressing in the last few months or even the last kind of few years, and we use that to justify or kind of create a baseline plan for this baseline of figures for this plan. So that's kind of run rate. And as you go up there, you've got that company-wide collaboration. And as you come up to the top of the bottom-up process, you have this iteration with management strategy. We're going through multiple rounds, fine-tuning those figures. And this is where things can get pretty tricky in the Excel environment. Top-down planning from the other side of the coin is sitting at that back of a napkin level, some high-level numbers, and that's really dictating the management strategy of the business moving forward. And then that's getting pushed down through the ranks. So it's not starting as broad, but it is going down. It can get as big at that bottom end of the planning cycle. The concern there is that when you get down to a certain depth, you're kind of plugging in cross-solving numbers in order to make sure it completely aligns to that management strategy. And that can be also a bit of a scary area in terms of low value. Personally, I like something that's somewhere along the lines of meeting in the middle. We have that kind of run rate based build up of planning from a wide user base that really drives responsibility for the numbers. And that's then aligning around in the middle with more of that top down marketing or management strategy. Not marketing, management strategy. The next concept here is in terms of your modeling components in a plan. We talk about centralized models and then support models. So centralized models are things like your P&L, your balance sheet. These are the kind of core building blocks of your plan, which comes back to the financials in the most part. And then off that, you have these ancillary support models, things like revenue, salaries, operations. You might have CapEx, travel, or kind of marketing initiatives as support models that then feed through based on account nominals back into these centralized P&Ls and balance sheets and cash flow models. When you're talking about security and how your users then see these models, you've got this cross-section of the models that they can see, where they can see salaries or marketing, and then the business structure, which is things like your cost centers, profit centers, or business units, or even companies. So if we look at a user in HR, they should actually be able to see the salaries model, but across the entire business, and the P&L just for their department. Whereas if you look at someone in sales, they've got more of a narrow view. They're seeing quite a few models: P&L, balance sheet, cash flow, sales KPIs, and revenue. And then they're also seeing the marketing budget from the marketing team. Without that nice cross-section of security, it can be quite hard to keep track of where things are at. I know that some kind of planning tools out in the market today, they give you the ability to do the access per model or the access per company unit, but really it's at that cross-section that you get that value of having the right person responsible for the right numbers, but having read access to what they should see in order to support their plan. So that brings me to our product. What is MODLR? So MODLR is built up of these three core components, and really we designed the product based on the idea that we couldn't see anything out in the market today that has these three items integrated and built from the ground up. We saw a few out there that had kind of a good modeling engine or a good collaborative and modeling engine, but then that was disconnected from a reporting system. There's certainly no end of good reporting systems out there, but they're often not connected to business modeling and collaborative planning systems. And so the idea here with MODLR is that you can build a comprehensive business model that is a digital shadow of your business. That model has data flows being updated every single night or every single hour or at the touch of a button from the finance system. And that's then re-emulating or re-pushing out those run rate figures in live rolling forecasts, but it's also holding the budget and then versions of the budget as you've progressed, along with any what-if scenarios as well. So that live model, when the numbers changed, recalculates the entire piece from start to finish, and then you're allocating users across that model in a secured and workflow manner so that the users can see just their portion of the model. And when they plug in a number, that number will consolidate up to the top level of the business. And then that will be visible in that last component, which is a dynamic pixel perfect reporting engine for dashboards, for management reports and packs. Excellent. So that's it in terms of slides. We'll jump across now and give a bit of a live demo. So the company we'll be using for this demo is a retailer who predominantly imports the products that they sell. However, they do manufacture a select number of products. This company, Endless Stationery, has stores in every state of Australia and in the major capitals of New Zealand, with their online store based out of Auckland in New Zealand. Now I'm going to assume the role of a territory manager for the New Zealand stores. So if I log into the planning section here, you can see the stores that I'm responsible for, along with the online store. Now, before we review this kind of bottom-up budgeting tool, what I'm going to do is actually take a moment to jump into the planning sandbox, which is actually a top-down tool. So typically as a territory manager, I wouldn't be able to see this. This is kind of an executive level tool. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start by just copying, I'll explain it a little bit more first. So I'm seeing our core metrics from the business at the top in terms of units and FTE. I'm then seeing a financial breakdown of the business at back of a napkin level. So revenue, cost of materials, manufacturing wages, cost of goods sold, and so on. And then our ratios are further down the page. Units produced as a portion of units sold, so we can account for our overruns. So in other words, based on our sales here, we've got 95 million units sold. We want to be producing a little bit more than that so that we have a buffer if we exceed our sales targets. And that's what this number here does. We've got standard features like average sell price, average cost price, manufacturing cost per unit, and so on. In terms of columns, we're seeing the last budget and last year's actuals. And then we've got this plan, which is our planning scenario. And the purpose of this tool is to let me play around with these numbers very quickly to test out or try out different management strategies to see if I can emulate or see what the numbers should roughly be if I impose my management strategy over the top of it. So I'm going to start by resetting it back to the budget. So our plan now, as you can see here, has 0 variance to our last budget. And then just to give you an example of how this works, if I was to increase our units sold, in fact, I can hover my mouse over and it tells me all the various items that making a change to this number will impact. So changing units sold will change our direct FTE, salaries and wages, revenue, cost of materials, units produced, production FTE, and manufacturing wages. And each of those will also have a net kick-on impact. So I'm going to increase the number of units we produce to 95 million. And as I hit save then, or click away, you can see that's actually impacting a lot of different components in the plan. So that increases our production units, our number of direct FTE, which is our sales staff responsible for selling those units. It increases our production FTE based on the fact that our production is now increased based on that units produced as a portion of units sold. And that's also then had a knock on to revenue, the cost of materials, the manufacturing wages, and then all the way down to EBIT. So that change, an increase of $2 million of additional units will have a 2.4% increase to our EBITDA. Now I'm going to reset that again. And this time I'm going to say, well, I'm going to add to our units sold, but we're not going to produce anymore. So we're going to close the gap between our sales and what we're going to produce. We're going to do it in this fashion here. So I'm going to go bring that back up to 95 million again. This time it's held our units produced exactly where it was, and it's done that by reducing our units produced as a portion of sold. So in other words, we're trying to get closer in terms of production to our sales figure that we expect to sell. We don't want to have as much buffer there. And what that means is we've got that same 2.15% impact to revenue and cost of margins, cost of materials. However, our manufacturing wages haven't increased because we haven't actually produced more stock. And that means now the net impact to EBITDA is 2.6%. And I can go through and actually play with any of these figures. I can go through and lock different components. So let's lock our revenue in place. Let's lock our cost of materials in place. Leave our revenue and our manufacturing wages. Just lock our cost of materials. So if I was to increase the units sold now, what that would say is that I'm planning on selling more product, but in terms of the cost to produce them, we want to hold that steady. So in other words, we're going to try and do more with less. So I'm going to increase here our sales by 1 million units. You can see that net impact kick in. And in order to achieve that maintaining of cost of materials at the same spending level, that's then played around with the average cost price. And we can see that has decreased a little bit, even though it's kind of so marginal and you can't actually see it with the current rounding. If I go again and we go even further now, what we should see is that now that's actually made a more significant impact to our average cost price. And I can go through and lock any component of the plan here. If I lock all the financials down, I can actually still play with our ratios and our units, but you'll see as I lock in our sell prices here, that's then going to quite quickly lock in our other parts of the model. Units produced with FTE, for instance, and so on. All right, so this is a tool we can use to go through and have a bit of a play with our business numbers from the top down and really set that management strategy, and as well as playing with a little bit of kind of scenario analysis there. Once I'm done with this plan, I can also push this back into the budget, and that pushes it through at the top and pushes it down through the business structure down to the bottom level of the plan. And that provides the users who are doing a bottom-up budget with a starting point. All right, that's enough from a top-down view. I'm going to jump back into our role as a regional manager or territory manager for New Zealand. So as a territory manager for New Zealand, I have Auckland store 1, 2, and 3, Wellington store 0 and 1, our online store within my responsibility area. As I complete the budget for each of them, I can mark them as complete, which will go through to a consolidated workflow. So my manager can see that I've completed the budgets in these certain areas, or at least I've submitted them, and they can give me feedback on that. Once I complete each of the stores, I can then submit a high level plan, which is for everything, and add some commentary and also get some commentary back from my manager when they approve that plan. Okay, let's jump in and have a look at how we're planning. So the different components of the plan or different instructions are listed down the left-hand side here. I'm going to skip our assumptions for now and go straight into our retail and online sales planning module. So because of security, I'm only seeing the stores I can see. However, there's still the stores in Australia. There's kind of another 25 stores. What we're seeing here is that we've got 3 months of actual sales history for units, then our budget going across. I'm seeing our bottom level of products, our SKUs, and I'm able to plan their units. Once I've planned their units, those units are getting added up into the brand level, and then we're seeing at a brand level the revenue, cost of goods sold, net sales, and margin for that whole brand as a whole. That's just to make sure we're not seeing, revenue for every single SKU and so on. Just saves us a bit of real estate space for our planning round. In terms of the base phasing here, the system's given me a couple of ways I can set up my plan: a seasonal run rate, which uses last year plus an overlay of management strategy, or a manual entry. So I can jump in here, I can change our methodology to manual entry, and that means I can go through then and say, well, last year we were tracking at around 150. I can go in and manually put in 150 across the board in that year. As I hit enter, that then saves it to the plan, and that consolidates down to here, calculates out the revenue, and that actually flows all the way back into a centralized profit and loss, which we'll jump into soon. So in this way, we've got kind of an aspect here of an annual budget where we're plugging the numbers in from a zero base, but we've also got that option of doing a kind of a rolling forecast methodology where we're using the run rates and the history and then an overlay in order to forecast out those sales units. At a national level, we have a view here to see the price points, and this lets me go through and actually see, okay, what's our price point tracking at? So 5.69, 7, I can go through and say, actually, as of August, I want to set the new price for the pencil product to $6.20 moving forward. Next is bulk sales orders. So predominantly our sales are from people visiting our stores. However, we do have some bulk B2B sales. And in this way, we can actually plan for those sales. So the interesting thing here is I've got my orders down the left. I'm picking my customer here, and I'll pick from our existing contacts list, and I'm planning this customer sales in US dollars. And you can see that then changed my standard sell price here down to the US dollar equivalent. I can then expand out one of my product brands here, Station Master. And so for Station Master, I'm going to say we lock in that same price point in the plan, and we will give them a little bit of a discount on the binders product. Now, across the board, I can say our number of units sold. I say we're going to sell 120 of them, and our big sales product here is pencils and pens and pen sets. Oh, paper and pens, sorry. So that then extrapolates out our revenue, and that revenue is actually in group currency, which is New Zealand dollars. So even though I'm planning our price point at a US dollars, at our customer's currency or the billing currency, and I'm planning out our volume here, that's then getting extrapolated out back into New Zealand dollars. And that's quite important when it comes to our sensitivities planning. So that's a point we'll touch on at the end of doing this bottom-up style budget, is playing with some of these scenarios. And I'll just quickly point out there, we have a couple of scenarios in the system, a budget and a stretch scenario. And I'll progress on, we'll come back to that. The next is production planning. So based on my total unit sales, I'm looking here at budget, at the same budget year, and pencils. And we can see that the sum of all our sales for this SKU is by month across the top here. And this is where we can add that production overrun. So we're going to say 7.5% is how many we want to increase from our initial sales numbers. I can trace the formula here and say, okay, cool. What that's saying is that our sales targets are 5,588. Our production overruns are 7.5, and that results in 6,007 units as our production target. That's built up of one part from our material DAO, another part from our material. This is effectively our bill of materials, and here's our processing. So we've got a process as part of assembly, and that's then in seconds. That gets extrapolated out based on the number of units, along with some basic assumptions around batch time, to then extrapolate out what our manufacturing wages headcount requirement is. So again, this isn't our sales staff wages, this is our manufacturing wages. And I'll just to illustrate that point there, I'll jump into the P&L now, and I just want to talk about this a little bit. We have in our P&L, so I'm looking at one store's P&L, and we have a line here called manufacturing labor. And if you look a little bit lower, we have our wages line. So our manufacturing labor is the labor working in production assembling our products. And our wages down here is our direct FTE responsible for selling our product in store. So the changes to that production planning we were just on will flow into the P&L automatically against our manufacturing line. And if I just jump one, so it's the production numbers. If I jump one model down, here we're planning our sales staff. So this is the number of FTE in our Auckland store and their hourly rate. So we've got 3 junior assistants each month going through the plan. And it's at this point, it's a different mechanism from our production planning. Our production planning is all based on the quantities going through, and it's a very driver intensive plan, whereas our kind of direct FTE, our sales staff planning here is very much a top level plan. We know that even if we flex our units sold quite significantly, we're not going to need to bring on additional sales staff on the shop floor. The next model here is travel planning, and this is just to say, at a high level, we're going to send some of our staff, 5 of our sales staff that you saw on that last sheet, off to a sales conference in London for 2 nights, and we can extrapolate the cost based on a company rate card. And I can just kind of explain that value. We can see here that the rate per night is $400 based on that destination London times the 2 nights and the 5 people, and that gives us our accommodation costs. Next is Capex Planning. We can see we're buying a car for one of the staff members there. It's a $45,000 car, and that kicks off in January 2021 and starts depreciating there. If I change the purchase month, you can see that the time frame there updates automatically. And just to drive the point home, if we jump back into our P&L now, we've got a depreciation line here, and you can see that's then kicking in February in our depreciation line. Now, I jumped in here briefly earlier to look at the P&L, our resulting budget. The important point to note here is that a lot of the components are coming from these ancillary models. However, we don't have anything planning our rent. And so I've actually manually plugged in a number here for rent. I'm going to change that to 450,000, and that's doing an even phasing across the year. I can also change the phasing method to say, actually, let's spread that across based on how we spent the money last year. So that's taking the total amount and multiplying that out as a given month's portion of last year's numbers, giving us that nice run rate type modeling there as well. So now that I've finished from the bottom up my plan for Auckland, I can lock it in. Before I do that though, I will actually go through and have a bit of a play with the sensitivities. So you saw earlier we had 2 different scenarios, a budget and a stretch. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to copy all of my budget into my stretch scenario. And so that goes for each of these modules, that goes through them one by one and takes all of the data that's sitting against the budget scenario, and it copies that into a scenario called stretch. Stretch is a kind of a name that we typically use when we're going to really test ourselves and push our limits of our sales. But I'm actually going to use that scenario just to play around with the Forex a little bit. So I'm now looking at the stretch numbers, our foreign exchange rates within that stretch scenario. And so if I have a bit of a play here, if I go through and say, actually, we're predicting a bit of a downturn in terms of USA and the currency conversion rate, and we're going to hit parity to New Zealand dollars for a majority of that budget year. The one area of the model in particular that was quite price sensitive or Forex sensitive was our bulk sales orders, because we have some customers that are selling they're buying our products in US dollars, and we have a specific price point with them. So looking here, I'm looking at the budget right now. Those prices are locked in. And if we look across to the right here, we can see the total revenue from those 2 US dollar customers it comes to a total of $1 million in that budget year. But if we look through in our stretch scenario now, where we've got that decreased foreign exchange to US dollars, we can then see that net impact of that change. And we've also got a nicer way of showing that. We've got a scenario comparison, which shows us that P&L that we saw earlier. And I've got my grouping of my territory. But really, we're looking at budget versus that stretch scenario, and we're getting a variance and variance percentage. And what we're seeing is that decrease in sales revenue due to that change in Forex, and that's then precipitating down through the P&L down to EBIT. And I can add some notes on what we're modeling in this specific stretch scenario. So again, decline in foreign exchange to US dollars. I must have a calculation on that field. There we go. Decline in Forex. US dollars to NZ dollars. So that's then the net impact to that line there within the local department, sorry, online department. I can also see that in group currency, that doesn't make any change because I'm actually planning in the group currency, which is New Zealand dollars for every other part of the model. All right, so that's at a high level playing with our Forex. I'm going to go back in here. I'm going to copy over our budget over our stretch again. And that's then going to, again, per each of those models, it's going to wipe our assumptions. The only thing we actually really changed, though, was this foreign exchange numbers up the top here. So if I jump into stretch now, we can see that that's now parity. If I go back and look at that scenario comparison again, we have no variance between our two plans. And I can now jump back in and actually have a bit more of a play with our numbers. So looking here, anything that's seasonal run rate is using a seasonal growth uplift for the plan, and I can say, well, let's bring that up to 10% growth. Actually, I'm in budget. Let's do that in stretch. So what happens if we have 10% growth across a key range of products there? I jump back into that retail and online sales, and we'll go back to the home area here and look at that scenario comparison, and we can see that that 10% growth rather than a 5% growth overlay, it ends up amounting to roughly 180K to the bottom line in that adjusted plan. So that's a bit of a taste of what we call sensitivities modeling or scenario what-if analysis. And the system gives you the ability to have any number of those scenarios running concurrently. Just another point, if you have any questions, you don't have to jot them down or remember them. What I get you to do is just write them down into the Q&A section of the webinar in Zoom, and that'll let you, it'll then flag it for us, and we'll see if we can get through the questions and answer them at the end of the demo. So that's it in terms of a top-down planning model and a bottom-up planning model with some aspects of things like rolling forecasts and kind of rolling logic, and we've even got some zero-based planning in there. Once you've got your plan in place, then you then look to engage a different pattern of behavior where you're looking at analyzing how you did against the plan month on month. And for that, we've got a reporting area. And the first thing I want to point out here, I've just jumped to the home page of the reporting area, and you can see it's a bit bland. But the really important thing is this top right button. So we're going to manually run import from the ERP system. I can hit that button and it's going to re-import the latest information from our finance tools. And that's really great if we're halfway through a month-end close and we wanted to see what the latest numbers are, or maybe make sure everything's okay before we close the books. We've got a couple of other core components here. The key thing to look at is how we performed in a given month against that budget. Now, I didn't do a great job of setting up that budget, so the variances are not even worth looking at. But what we see here is the same month in the prior year is the first column, the new month of actuals, the comparison to the budget that we've just completed or we've theoretically would have completed a couple of months ago, and also looking at that same thing from a year-to-date perspective for the same month. This then gives us the abilities to analyze any variances and really go into depth about explaining what happened, why we missed the mark, and that sits with that piece of information. So it sits against that month and against the budget scenario, so that if you in the future come back and you're looking at some of those variances and you want to know why that happened, the comments will still be there and still be accessible. Now, if you cast your minds back to when we talked about the 3 pillars that build up this product modeler, the last product there was the reporting. And reporting comes in a couple of flavors. There's a bit of a spectrum of authoritative reporting or pre-built reports, and at the other end of the spectrum is self-service. And so MODLR really allows you to have that ability to do both. So this is a pre-canned report. I'm playing here with the different product groups. I can jump in and see different parts of the business and kind of see different departments against each other. But it's very much pre-canned. It is, I get what I see here, and I can't change it that much. So it's, again, that authoritative end of the reporting spectrum. On the discovery end, we've got a different approach entirely. So I've now opened up the discovery dashboard. It's got that same sales data behind it, but now I get to interrogate it using the English language. So instead of, because I don't really know where to start here, I can just ask for help. We can see we've got quite a bit of data loaded here. We've got units, the gross margin, revenue, cost of goods sold, discount, and the cost per click for the online advertising department. And that's categorized by time, scenario, customer, location, product, sales channel, and shipping. So there's all sorts of information at the top there, and there's also all sorts of ways of slicing that information down the bottom. And that means we can actually just ask a question if we want to get some insights here. So what was the total revenue last year for all customers? Now, I haven't mentioned a product or a shipping method or a sales channel. And so MODLR is going to ask me to fill in those gaps. So all locations, all products, all sales channels, and all shipping methods. And we can see that in 2020, we made $17 million worth of revenue. It gives us that location down the bottom there. So we understand exactly what the data point is that we're referencing there. We make sure that we're referencing what we intended to find. There's also different kind of information here around which sales channel we're on. So I can actually say, well, how much of that was online as a sales channel? And they'll say, you can see where it says all channels in the last data point, that's now changed to online. And we made not 8.5 million in online. And then I can move to drill a bit deeper into this information. So what is the trend of sales last year? I'll say trend of revenue, because I don't want to see units, by all products. And you can see that's giving me a breakdown of revenue by products, by product brands. I can say by all locations, and we'll also do by all sales channels. I didn't spell channels right, I said chancels. So all sales channels. Excellent. So I'm just going to rearrange a little bit here. So we've got our breakdown by product brand, by location, and sales channel. And I'm going to open up the slicing panel here and just kind of show some additional slicing filters here. So our location, I can jump into different products. And you can see I've changed to coolers complete. And what that's done is then recut that top chart by coolers SKUs. I'm seeing the different locations, and now that's showing me within that brand of coolers complete, and the same with sales channels. So I can then play around and choose, say, different places in like North America now, and now I'm cross-referencing coolers complete with North America. And all charts have then recut themselves in order to show exactly what I'm looking for there. But that's not the only kinds of questions you can ask. You can ask kind of a bit more detailed questions. For instance, I could say, who are the top 15 customers in 2021 for revenue? You can see here, it's just off the screen a little bit. I can reformat that. So Metis Vivamus is our #1 customer within North America for the coolers complete product brands. But if I jump back to all products and all locations, you can actually see that they're not our #1 customer in 2021. If we go help again, we'll just have a look at what else we've got there in terms of data set. So we've got this cost per click, and that's our average cost for an advert that's been clicked on. So it might be worth looking at what we're making a lot of money on versus what we're spending a lot of money on advertising for, and whether we're kind of investing their ad dollars in the right products. So I can ask a different kind of question again. What is the relationship between cost per click and revenue in 2020 by product? And again, it's just put it down the bottom there, but if I reformat that in here, we can now see that with revenue going up and down on the left here and cost per click going on the right, we've got a great product here where you can see we'd expect it so that based on how much revenue we're making from a product, we're also spending, ideally spending not as much, but we may spend quite a bit on their revenue. And our products should be kind of going up that line, so we're spending proportionate to how much money we're making. And what we can actually see here is that the pencil product SKU is actually, we're spending a lot more per click on it, proportionate to the revenue it's making versus other products. So it might be worth jumping in and having a little bit more of a look at the detail behind that. And the bottom line for this self-service reporting technology is that you should be able to, if you know about the information you want to report on, you should be able to just ask for it. So build a report showing units sold for last year and this year on columns, as you'd expect in an Excel spreadsheet, and all products on rows. And so if I scroll down now, you can see I've got our products on rows, and I can drill into that. And then on our columns there, we then have last year and this year. And this year is an incomplete year. We haven't finished up our Q4, and we're probably missing March so far. We've got a bit of data for March, but it's definitely not a complete month. If you like the report and you want to distribute it, you can then download that through to Excel very easily. All right, so I'm going to stay on the line, and we're going to go through some of those questions. I'm going to give it just 30 seconds just to let any lingering questions come through, and then we'll start having a look at the questions that you've asked us today. All right, just going through now. I can see a couple of questions. One here, how can we import actuals for past periods from our ERP system, and how is MODLR going to store that data? So MODLR as a platform is built for integrations, deep integrations into multiple systems. So we can actually extract data from any standard database. And then for a number of systems that are more advanced and have what we call APIs or interfaces for applications, MODLR can talk to them as well. When MODLR runs these imports, which is typically a scheduled activity that can happen every night or every half an hour, every minute, it then imports them through into a local data warehouse that sits on the same MODLR box. And you can use that extensively as a data warehouse, or you can just use it to store the staged data ready to load into your models. If you have any further questions on that particular topic, there's that Q&A section at the bottom. You can add to an additional question there. We've got a couple more. We use Excel for budgeting and forecasting. If we were to go with MODLR, can we convert what we're doing in Excel to MODLR? And are there any, if there are any limitations, what are they? So there's no direct conversion from Excel to MODLR. However, Excel documents provide a really great blueprint for planning out a MODLR model. Planning model specifically, it's great because you do have a lot of kind of different equations there. And we have a couple of tools that help you kind of convert pieces, or rather make it easier to convert across. And I think one of the things we didn't show, I didn't show just now, is that there's an Excel add-in that comes with MODLR that lets you pull specific information out of your model and also type numbers into Excel and have that go through into the MODLR engine. So you can actually be building models and have them, building models in MODLR and have them work live with Excel, so that the front end actually hasn't changed from what you're used to. So your users who participate in the plan, they still get an Excel workbook in that instance if they're using that technology. And it may look like their old model, but now the numbers are going live into a centralized area where you're seeing the results of those plans add up in real time. Let me just have a look. I think I've got a couple of more questions here. How long will a solution like this take to build? So I guess we're talking about the endless stationary demo there. MODLR solutions in the planning space, it's a bit of a varied implementation time because it depends on the complexities of that model. We've had some customers where our resellers have put together a model in a matter of 2 to 3 weeks. And we have other customers that have taken a more, they're building a bigger model, and it's got a lot more moving parts, and it's kind of around the 3 to 4 month mark. So it's a bit of a varied path there, and it really depends on how complex or simple you want your model to be. And I think that reflects quite fairly how simple or complex the calculations or formulas are in an Excel equivalent environment. Another question about ERP from earlier, from ERP integration, so I'll skip that one. And do you offer a free account with MODLR? So with MODLR, there is an entry-level plan that you can sign up for directly. What we'll probably do if you go down that path, it gives you a very small instance that you can play with and you can start building some prototypes. However, it doesn't work for, you'll need to upgrade if you're building a kind of a company-wide planning model. And typically when you register with us, we put you in touch with the closest reselling partner to you, which is going to be Infointellica, who are experts in the MODLR platform. Cool. I'm just going to have a look around and see if there's any other questions. I don't think there are, so I'll pass back to you, Kavinda.
Thanks, Ben. Thank you for that informative session, and I really appreciate taking us through the product and live demos. Friends, once again, thank you so much for joining the webinar. And I know it's kind of busy, and taking off from busy schedule is really appreciated. Thank you, guys. And Dinusha, are you there?
Yes.
No, I think it's yeah. Dinusha, over to you.
Okay. Thank you very much for everyone. Taking your time in, and looking forward to have you on board. Yes, well. Thank you again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Ben.
Thank you. Bye.